Harry, we both know that David was a man after God's own heart, right? And we see that he always trusted God, whether it was the story of David and Goliath, a famous story. But there's an interesting aspect here where he could have taken Saul's life a couple of times, but he chose to trust God. And we're going to study that tonight. It's in First Samuel chapter 26, and the heart of it is in verse 8 to 11. We're going to do it verse by verse. So, verse 8, Abishai said to David, "Today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't strike him twice."
Yeah, so Saul and his army of 3,000 people had gone looking for David, and that's lots big enough army for just capturing David and his men. So so they've gone to a certain place, and David knows they have come. And that night, when Saul's army goes to bed, David says, maybe we'll just slip over and see what we can find. And lo and behold, the army is all sleeping around Saul, and so David says to Abishai, his nephew, who is very involved in his military stuff, let's go down to where they're sleeping. And he says, sure, let's do that. And here we say that, so now they've walked into the camp and they are standing over Saul. And Saul's laying there sleeping with Abner, his right-hand man, beside him. And there's his spear stuck in the ground. And Abishai says to David, he says, please let me deal with this. One strike is all I need. And David says, no, he says, we're not doing that. And so anyways, that's the setting that we're on right here. And yeah, go ahead.
Verse 9, but like you said, David said to Abishai, "Don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless?" Go ahead, Harry.
Yeah, so David was really clear that God had made David to be king and meant for him to be king. And Saul was still king and Saul was still harassing him. But David says no. He says God's on the throne. God's got this. I don't have to do anything. It's his plan and I want to go with his plan. He says we're not killing Saul. And this, can you imagine the temptation? This is the second time that David's let Saul off the hook. And so he says, we'll take his water jug and spear and we'll leave the camp and we'll let that go for tonight. Go ahead.
Verse 10, "As surely as the Lord lives," he said, "the Lord himself will strike him, or his time will come and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish." So we see this aspect once again, like we started off, where he just utterly trusts the Lord to deal with this aspect. What's your thoughts, Harry?
Yeah. So he knows that he's being tested here, and so David has this opportunity again, the second time, to take out Saul, and yet he knows that God's on the throne, and in His time He will make this happen. And actually, David ends up waiting from about the age of 17 when he was anointed till we know at the age of 30 that he finally becomes king. For 10 years of that he is fleeing from Saul. And this is the second time, the last time, that he has this opportunity to take Saul's life. And he's still allowing Saul to live, waiting for God to take him out. And he does. God takes him out about a year and a half later, or 2 years later, but still 2 years. That's a long time when you're fleeing from Saul. And in a battle with the Philistines, that Saul dies. But in the meantime, this is what his plan is. Go ahead.
Verse 11, "But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now get the spear and water jug that are near his head, and let's go." And why do you think he did that? Why do you think he got this spear and the water jug?
Oh, yeah. So now they take the spear and water, and so they go over into a far enough hill that they can't rush him. And he hollers out to Abner, Saul's right-hand man. He says, Abner, he says, you've really been a loser tonight. He says, I came to kill your master, and you weren't protecting him. You're just not the kind of guy that's reliable. And of course, it says that God put a sleep on. He provided a sleep for all the armies, so they would not wake when David was there. God was protecting David clearly, But David was taking a chance, but he hollered out and says, "I've got your spear and water jug, and I could have taken your life." And then Saul, of course, apologizes and all that stuff and says, "Oh, I said I'll never do this again." But anyways, that Saul lied about everything, and he was a wicked man. And but David passed the test, and he trusted God to provide what he said he would. And David was rewarded for that because Jesus is of the line of David. And he just did a lot of things right. David had a few faults too. We all know that. But he just trusted God. He knew. And even when he was accused of his faults, he immediately apologized. He said, "I've sinned against God. That's the long and the short of it." And he realized that. He was a God man all the way through. I just love David.
Awesome, Harry. And what do you think would be the main takeaway then that we could get from this message here, or this little heart of it?
God's on the throne. Of all the chaos we have in the world today, we have lots of that, as we all know. Don't worry about it. God's on the throne. If we are faithful, we do our part right, we'll be fine. That doesn't mean we're not going to die or whatever, but if we die, we're a child of God, we're good. All the way around, God's looking for people he can trust. He could trust David. He proved himself again and again, and he wants to trust us too. And if we're reliable, predictable, and responsible, he will trust us, and he will give us a project or two to step up for him. And that is so beautiful. What a privilege it is to be in his field working on, working for the gospel.
Amen. Thanks a lot for this, Harry.
Thank you.